Welcome to Podlamania Podcast, your photography and video podcast, where we introduce you to some of the most amazing creatives from around the world. I'm your host, Wayne Johns, and as always, I'm here with my good friend, buddy, and co-host, Jake Hicks. Hey, buddy.
How you doing, man? You good?
I'm good, man. I'm good. How is it in the old Hicks household?
Oh, man, I got up especially early for this one. Yeah, especially early.
What, 1 p.m.?
Yeah, the crack of noon, yeah.
The crack of noon.
Yeah.
Nothing changes then, mate, for you.
Yeah, it's all good. But yeah, I'm really, really excited about this one, for sure. Yeah, I'm really interested to get into this one. Yeah,
me too, man. I mean, this is going to be, I don't think, our slot is going to be long enough for this, but we'll see what we can do, isn't it?
For sure.
Anything to say before we get into it, mate? That's the main thing. I mean, this is episode 15, isn't it? Episode 15.
Yeah, I think we could probably get a few more episodes under our belts. So I think we spoke offline about maybe doing a few more of these, because at the moment we've been doing them monthly, and we were thinking about maybe doing them every other week or something. Yeah. Bi-weekly, sorry, that's the posh way of saying it,
Yeah, bi-weekly. Yeah, bi-weekly, every fortnight. So bi-weekly, yeah, I mean, we've had requests, we've had demand, and, competition. It almost pushes us that way as well, really. Other podcasts with lots of creative content, we got to step up the game, I think, man, don't you think?
Yeah. And also I think we needed to get a handle on it. I know you do 99% of the work on these, but now that you're up to speed, and I feel that you're ready to do them every other week, Wayne.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the confidence, man. Now that you think I'm ready. Yeah.
No worries.
Well, should we get into this episode?
Let's do it.
We've got an interesting guy, haven't we? I mean, this guy's been around for a few years, still looking as youthful as
I know,
ever.
He looks exactly as he did 10 years ago.
And let's just tease the audience a little bit. I mean, this chap coming on, I mean, he's been known as a Photoshop guru, mate. A Photoshop guru. A guru, yeah. Can you carry that sort of title?
No, I can't.
Can you carry that, Jake? Guru? No.
Gel King is all I have. That's as high as I go.
Is what? As high as you go?
Gel King is I don't go any higher than King.
And he's also been known as a photographic compositing whiz. How about that?
Wow.
Can you match that one as well, Jake?
These names? Yeah, no.
No, me neither, man. But we know him probably best for being a photographic and Photoshop educator. And for many, many years as well, isn't it? Many years.
Yeah,
and I've heard, just on the grapevine, that he's kind of a bit of an all-round nice kind of guy as well, mate. I've heard rumours.
I can confirm. I know he sounds nice and looks friendly online, but yeah, no, I have met this man in person, and I can confirm that he is a really good guy. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen his works over the years on the educational platforms on and off for a decade or more. So he's certainly standing the test of time. But we know for a fact that he's been really generous as well, because he's kindly given us a discount code for all our listeners, which will get this, mate. You're going to be stunned at this, and I'm glad you already sat down. A whopping 20% off the subscription costs to his educational platform.
Well, I'm going to use it. I'm already paying full price, so count me in. I'm going to use it.
You might want to take a leaf out of his book, mate. 20% off discount for educational platforms, maybe on your own workshops, mate. The pain in his face. Yeah. If you could see the pain in his face, then. Well, that 20% gets you 20% off the subscription costs, and that gets you instant access to absolutely everything. But to get that 20% discount code, mate, I'm afraid you've got to listen to the end of the podcast, because that's where we'll be giving out the code.
I promise.
Right at the very end. Yeah.
Let's introduce this hero.
I don't know if he's looking nervous, scared, or is he awake? Has he gone to sleep? There he is. There he is. Well, let's welcome him in. Let's welcome. It's only Mr. Aaron Nace, isn't it?
From Flern.
Aaron from Flern. Do we call you Mr. Flern, or maybe even Sir Flern a lot?
Sir Flern a lot. Yeah. I like the sound of that.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. This is so much fun. We're gonna have a blast.
We're gonna have a blast with
It
this.
should be good.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a shame we've only got sort of an hour or so, because we can't get all the fun stuff in an hour with you. There's so much to talk to you about and share with the audience. It's going to be amazing. But it means we just have to get you back for another one.
Deal. We'll do it.
Deal. Okay, serious questions, man. Should we get into it, Jake?
Let's do it.
Aaron, welcome. Now, before we get into you describing yourself and what you do, I've just got one thing to say, and this is a known fact. Now, since you've been running Flern, which we'll get into in a minute, how many hairstyles and beard styles have you had?
Too many to count, man. Oh,
Too many to count.
It's a weird thing. I was speaking in Niagara Falls last year, and the person who introduced me, like at the podium, made it a joke that like that was my superpower was my hairstyle change, and it's just a weird. I've been on video for 10 years now, and I'm assuming that most people go through a bunch of hairstyles in 10 years, but I just happen to have video evidence of it. So
True. It's true. Yeah. Yeah.
I think I've seen a statistic somewhere. It says over 20 different hairstyles and beard styles since you've been running Flern.
Who is
pretty
doing
nuts.
that research?
yeah, exactly. Like what kind of data bank is out there? Like, did someone get
You need
paid
to update your wiki page. That's it.
Oh man, that's impressive. I've got to say that's impressive, man. It's nice that you keep refreshing that look as much as you do all your content. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started, I had a shaved head and no beard. I went to full beard with chest length hair, and now I'm back to a very short, trimly manicured beard with a buzzed on the sides haircut. So, yeah, I just can't keep just. I just get reckless. I'm like, I gotta be a new person again. Change my hair.
Man, I've got to say, man, the dark hair and the dark beard looks good. I mean, I purposely silver mine to give me this aged look.
I've got it too. I don't know if you can see, on Skype here, but I'm, I've got a purposeful silvering coming in myself. So.
Oh yeah, man. That's wow. Yeah, I really feel
this sort of stage. So, Aaron, for our audience, how would you describe yourself and what you do? That's our first question.
Well, my background's in photography, so a lot of people, I guess, know me these days as an educator and, the host of Flern on YouTube, as well as Flern.com. And that's one of my big passions is sharing knowledge and educating and providing content that helps people grow their own creative endeavors. But my background and how I got my start was actually in photography. So I'm an avid photographer. I shoot kind of everything. Like conceptual photography is kind of like what I guess I would be known for, if anything at all. But these days I'm shooting everything to food, landscapes, wildlife, like travel, still conceptual headshots. I mean, just about everywhere my personal interests go, photography seems to follow there as well. So, I just, basically kind of an ever curious person. And thankfully, photography is one of those really, really cool passions that can kind of go with everything that I'm curious about. Like, I'm really into food. Cool. I'll take pictures of my food. I really want to travel around the national parks. I'll bring my camera and take landscapes. So that's for me where I get my enjoyment out of all this. And, photography for me is mostly fun. My primary career is as an educator. And I have a blast. And I also get to shoot really, really fun stuff and then produce tutorials for Flern.com, which is, my education company. So, I kind of lucked out. I'd still be in the photography world as a career. But as far as my, what I shoot personally, it's pretty much just things that I'm interested in.
And I think the education side allows you to have that diversity as well. I think that if you were just a straight down the road sort of photographer, chances are to be, to see some decent amount of success, you need to be almost niche to a certain extent, doing like architectural or doing food photography. Like, I think you need to be doing one thing. But with education, it does allow you the ability to go, let's explore this, and then we can share what we've learned with other people. So, yeah, I can definitely see how that would be a bonus.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And I was actually thinking about this the other day, and like how kind of weird that idea is, right? Like why can't an architecture photographer also photograph food? Because like obviously if you understand photography, composition, creating images, and you're passionate about your subject material, like you can really shoot anything. Like I feel like someone who really truly understands image making can shoot everything. So it is super interesting that like as professional photographers, for the most part, we're driven towards like creating a niche, and I don't know, like I don't know why.
Isn't that driven by expertise though? I mean, if you do one thing just 100% of the time, I would have thought that unless you're some sort of gifted lucky sod, then you're gonna be better at it than somebody who just spends 10% of their time doing it and 10% doing food and 10% doing fashion.
Probably, yeah, probably. I would say that that's a pretty valid argument for that. I guess
there are some people though, Aaron. Yeah, you're right though. There are some people who are just genuinely gifted about just creative image making, and just everything they touch does look really good. Yeah. I mean, I've got a guy who's a wedding shooter, and he just goes to weddings and does images that I would just never ever see, or the regular person would just never ever see. He's like photographing the bride in front of a blacktop piano, and it looks like they're in front of a lake with lights on it. And it's just like, how are you seeing that? I don't see that sort of thing. So I think there are people who genuinely can see the world in a specific way.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, like, is it that a client will just have like a better idea of like, oh, we want someone to shoot landscapes. Let's find a landscape photographer, and then, you know what I mean? Like, is it just makes it easier on clients?
It's a confidence thing as well. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go to a surgeon and go, okay, this guy mainly does feet, but I really want some brain surgery. Like, you know what I mean? I think it's just a confidence thing, isn't
it? You got a good point there.
So how did you get into the photography side of it then, Aaron, as that's where you sort of started? How did you sort of get into there in your early days?
So that was actually travel was my big thing. So I went to school for product design. So I've always been a visual person. I've been like drawing and painting and, building things my whole life. But photography it came to me pretty late, all things considered. I picked up my first camera, for quote unquote real when I was like probably 23, 24 years old. And, before that, I just kind of like didn't really see photography so much as like, I just didn't understand the possibilities that photography, like everything that you could do through photography. So I was traveling around South America and brought like a little point and shoot with me and just had a blast shooting stuff. Because obviously, like when you're traveling, everything is like sparkly and beautiful and like, oh, I've never seen that before. Let me take a picture of that. And it's like, someone like bent over with their ass crack hanging out, and it's just like,
turn it black and white, mate.
Right?
And,
yeah.
It's zoom in black and white. It's an art piece.
Yeah. And so I came back, and I actually had some really, really great pictures, because I was just like in really amazing locations, and through like family and friends, they were, like, hey, I like looking at your pictures, like, I think you could give this like a real go. And I was like, well, I mean, I really enjoy like traveling. I really enjoy shooting. This is something I want to do. So I decided, I was going to jump in I'm just like a head first kind of person in general. So I was like, I'm going to learn photography. So I was browsing around Flickr.com at the time, which was kind of like the site for photographers back in, 2002, 2003. And basically the images that were inspiring me were a lot of like people and portraiture. And there was a self-portrait project going on there called the 365 project, where a person would take a picture of themselves every single day for a year. And to me, I was just like, that's amazing opportunity to learn photography, right? Like I'm going to have to do this hours and hours for like literally every single day. I wasn't being paid for this. So like just photographing myself was a like cost effective way of doing this. And, I just dove in head first. So, my self-portrait project really did launch, my photography career and, very much, formed, all of the photographs that I've taken, since then.
I've seen some of those shots, and I've certainly seen that project that you did. Like some of those shots are incredible. I mean, they would look like they would take weeks to do, in all fairness, like at least weeks to do, especially in terms of some of the post-pro that was going on in there, like the gorilla on the sofa sat next to you and you're eating the sandwiches and stuff. I mean, like, and you're really doing those a day?
Yeah, I mean, one a day for a year. I mean, the ones you remember were the better ones. There were definitely some where I was just
No,
like
sure,
snapped on it and I'm like, I am done, like I can't think of anything. I am just exhausted. But I really tried to give it my all, and this was I had a job at the time, but this was how I spent almost all of my time outside of the job. Every day I'd go to work, and while I was at work, I would think about what type of image I was going to produce, and then I'd get home, get my camera out, go to a location, shoot it, and go home and edit it. And I learned Photoshop during this process too, because, when your resources are relatively limited, again, I was photographing myself, didn't have much of a budget. I, was just, I was living at home at the time with my parents as well. So it was, it was what I could photograph and what I could do within, the radius of my parents' house. And I kind of had to rely on Photoshop to be able to make some of these, like, you can only have so many days of like, this is me on the couch, this is me in my, you know what I mean? Like, that's just going to get really boring really quickly. So, that's when the fantasy stuff started coming into play, where it's like, oh my God, like, I can do anything that I want, combining photography and Photoshop. All of a sudden, I'm not at all limited to these resources that I have around me. I can use photography and Photoshop as like a new art form to create things that were visually interesting to myself.
Can people still see that project? Is it still available?
Oh, totally. Yeah, 100%. It's I'm pretty dang sure.
If they just search Aaron Nace 365, will it?
Yeah. Well, let me just check this out here. I'm pretty sure I have them on my personal website. Yeah. So if you just go to my personal website, which is aaronnace.com, that's AARON, N as in Nancy, ACE.com, you just scroll down on there's just one page. It's just my images. Just scroll down. Yeah, you can see my self-portraits.
I highly recommend everybody do that. Yeah, because I mean, I've seen them before, and like to think how some of those images were done on a day-to-day basis is incredible. And I've actually got a question that's further down the list, because I thought that you might mention this 365 project. But one of the questions was, how important do you think like a major project is? I mean, you mentioned it briefly about you saw like huge sort of rise or a little bit of success after releasing that big project. You saw some traction. Like, do you think that this is what it takes nowadays to get seen, is to spend some time on a major project like this to actually get some sort of movement, some sort of traction, and get some vision, as it were, on your work?
Well, I do think there is a lot of value to consistency. And if people know that they can come to you day in and day out and get more of what they want, it's like McDonald's, right? Like
True.
You're going to be able to get fries every time you stop by McDonald's. If they're changing the menu every day, then you might not know what you're going to get, and you might not stop in as often. So Personally, I took the lessons that I learned from my 365-day project and translated that directly into YouTube. So where I started out, creating a personal, self-portrait every single day, when I transitioned into education, I started by creating a free YouTube tutorial every single day, and I did that for multiple years.
Wow.
Was it every day? Wow.
Every single day. Yeah. For the first 2 to 3 years, it was every single day. Then it dropped down to like 3 days a week, 3 days a week. And now we're doing once a week. But we have not stopped. We haven't, I mean, if you look back at the Flurn catalog, we haven't missed a week.
Where there's not a tutorial.
Yeah. I mean, one came out yesterday. how to create a double exposure in Photoshop. It's free. It's on YouTube. And we released it on Instagram too. So you can check out our Phlearn, that's PHLEARN on Instagram. We released like a shorter condensed version of it on Instagram. So yeah, we're just being consistent is a good way to, kind of, I don't know, build a little bit of a brand around your content. So yeah, I would say
content is key as well.
Yeah,
I mean, having like that sheer volume of content that you were putting out. I mean, obviously 365, and then you went into the YouTube. And what sort of year were you doing this? Was this back in like 2010, 2011?
2011, isn't it? Yeah. So,
yeah.
2011.
So Phlearn is officially founded in 2011, but I started online education in 2008. So at that point, it was like one-on-one, like Skype sessions, kind of like what we're doing right now.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like literally the transition was actually super smooth. I was on Flickr.com producing these self-portraits, and I started getting a flood of messages asking if I would teach people Photoshop.
Right.
Nice.
I was like,
you were in that sweet spot then. Yeah, back then that was definitely that sweet, especially for YouTube as well, for sure.
Exactly. Well, at this point, it's actually interesting because YouTube was early days. YouTube didn't have HD at this time, and it also didn't allow you to upload a video that was longer than like 6 or 8 minutes, something like that.
Oh, so really? Okay.
My early videos, the first 100 tutorials I made were on Vimeo.com because if you remember back in the day, Vimeo's like big selling point was we have HD,
Right. True.
Which like today is like, that's crazy. YouTube didn't have HD, right? But back in the day, this was before Google bought YouTube. It was a free service. There were no ads on YouTube either. And it was a very, very different platform. But once YouTube started, it was very obvious that the community was on YouTube and the discoverability on YouTube was just so much greater than it was on Vimeo, we actually transitioned all of our videos onto YouTube and remain there. So I would say, consistency is key. Create as much content as you possibly can, high quality content, and go where people are, for instance, for photographers nowadays, having a presence on Instagram is just a great idea because everyone's on Instagram and it's a visual media. So like, personally, took a little bit of a break from Instagram, but now I'm like back on it in full force. And it's I think there's no better marketing platform currently for photographers. And also it's just like a really great way to like meet people and, like hang out with, new friends. So
creatives.
I love it.
So you sort of catapulted yourself into this photographic and educational retouching world then, and I'm guessing you found that a lot more exciting than the prospect of designing furniture then, hey?
Well,
because that was one of your maybe sort of careers, wasn't it, early on, a furniture designer? I think it was impatience, to be honest, which pushed me into this because I really do have a love of design, and I would really love to be a furniture designer or product designer, but there's a little bit of a hierarchy that happens within many professions, and in the design world, it's one of those things where you kind of work your way up. Like you started as a junior designer, you kind of get the projects that maybe aren't the most fun. You're designing a little knob on a dishwasher type of things like that. And you working your way up, then you become a senior designer for, a microwave company. And then you can transition that. And, maybe eventually you're designing like cars, which is kind of like the coolest thing to design, right? Like in the product design world, like everyone wants to design cars. I mean, nice.
I say everyone, and I mean me, obviously, because
I know what you mean, though. Yeah.
Cars are just like cool, right? Like if you could be like, you see like the new, Porsche Panamera drive down the street and be like, I drew that. You see that how it looks? I did that. Like, and someone can actually claim that. That's really, like everything that you see and interact with that's created in this world has been designed. And we often don't think about like, where did the look and feel of this product come from? But it's, behind it is a team of designers and engineers that like are physically in the world of cars. They're sculpting this car out of clay and deciding on the curvature, and like they work with the engineers for aerodynamics and things like that. So
but that's very tactile and 3D. Like, I mean, how does, I mean, I definitely hear where you're coming from, and I can see how the two fields collide, but at the same time, that's such a physical design process compared to something which is just flat pixels. Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I know they're both creative, but how do you find coming away from that? Do you still like to get some clay out now and then to actually start creating something physical? Like, do you miss that aspect, or did you not?
Yeah, so all design, product design starts with drawing, obviously, because it's just way faster and less expensive than, pulling out clay. So it's always drawing. So I grew up drawing and painting. This was like a big thing, part of my life. And so it was always understood that you start in 2D. You get your ideas out in 2D through a quick drawing, and then that can kind of iterate possibly into something 3-dimensional. And learning to draw and build products and concepts in 2 dimensions really helped me out when I moved into photography, because composition, light, shape, and form, like focal points, these things were already ingrained in my education as a designer. Not to mention, I learned a lot of Photoshop in design school too, because I was using Photoshop to actually render products that I was drawing. Not for photography at all, but, actually like using a Wacom tablet and making physical design sketches in Photoshop.
Okay.
So, it's... there's a famous designer who, I don't remember his name, which is unfortunate. I think he did the Stendig calendar, that like really iconic calendar. I have it in my house. I'm probably not even saying that right too, so I should just move on to the more vague. But anyway, basically he said like, a good designer should be able to design anything. Because once you understand like visual form and like the interaction between, shape, negative space, like if you really understand design, you should be able to design just about anything. And I totally agree with that. What I learned drawing cars definitely influenced my work as a photographer in probably more ways than I can possibly understand.
So how valid and how valuable do you think it is for people now? And I would totally agree with everything that you've just said, and I would echo the fact that I was I'm trying to think of a sensible way of saying classically trained in art, but I was like painting and drawing and sculpture and design, and I have a background in that long before I ever got into photography, and I still like fine art drawing and that sort of stuff, and I still find that I use those techniques of the ability of being able to see, not do, which is what I think photographic training is now, is it teaches you what to do, whereas I think that some of the art training that I had previously was teaching you how to see, which I find just so valuable now in being able to light and look at form and shape, and being able to try and make that look as interesting, visually engaging in a 2D space as we can do. Would you say that you would you recommend that people go outside of just photographic training as well to get better? Would you look at other aspects
100%.
of art? Yeah.
100%. I mean, like personally, when I'm looking to be inspired as I'll say that I'm a photographer, right? But like when I'm looking for inspiration, I actually try to not look at other photography, because
Agreed. Yeah.
the tendency is to kind of just like, even if it's unconscious, you kind of start copying other things that you see, like, oh, they're doing something cool. Not only do you start copying things, and I don't mean it like maybe you like the lighting of, like, for instance, like 10 years ago when I was getting into photography, like Gregory Crewdson was like oh my God, everyone wants to shoot like Gregory Crewdson. So I like looked up his work, and then like for a month I tried to like make my photos look like his, you know what I mean? And like that was like kind of intentional, but I'm sure along the way I've done a lot of unintentional like copying or borrowing too. So being inspired by other photography is, it can be great, but you also run the risk, especially if you're in this, as a profession, you run your risk of starting to compare yourself with other photographers, and that can just like lead to, nasty places where like, oh,
Agreed.
I'm not as good as they are. I'm not as, I'm not doing his cool stuff. Like, look, they're in Japan and I'm just sitting on my couch. Like, right? Like,
we're still recording, Aaron. Yeah.
It can lead to a lot of that sort of stuff. For me, anyway. I don't want to speak for anyone
Copying
else.
as well, and like copying is definitely a very valid way of learning. And like you said, you did it and that's definitely a very valid way of learning. But I do think it can sort of inhibit the creative process a little bit. I mean, like from my point of view, I used to get a lot of inspiration from anime and the colors that is used in anime. I know for a fact that's where my colored gel work comes from now. Is that
Cool.
just because like colors in anime is totally abstract. It's like you look at something there's a bright red. Like that doesn't make any sense, but in anime you get away with it because you're being told to sort of suspend your belief, as it were. And I know that those colors were transferred into my own images, in the color gels. But that didn't come from being inspired by other shooters. That came from outside influence. So I would, definitely agree with that.
And now, there's a pretty good chance that people are looking at your work and being inspired by your work and then trying to like do what you're doing.
Oh,
But-
sure. We've seen that happen, and some of it not in good examples either, Jake, isn't it?
Well, that's the same with anything that's hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always going to be.
Right. But, you miss out by, trying to imitate another person's work because you'll never get to an original place by doing that. Like what you just mentioned, Jake, about like your influences are in anime and combining like your passion in anime with photography, that's what gave you your unique style. And like,
I would
you
say
definitely
so, yeah.
have a unique style that like, sets you apart from other people. So, that's why I'm always trying to like chase all these other passions besides photography, because photography just like, I think blends in super well with just about anything you're interested in. And, like personally, when I'm looking for like just pure inspiration, I go to like art museums and, look at paintings and sculpture and like just totally other forms of art. I go into nature and I just like look to be inspired by like the earth, or, like I go into like my dream world and, try to like come up with fantasies. And I do writing as well. I'll write short stories and I'll produce those short stories as photographs. I'll take the most interesting part
cool.
of my short story and make that into a photograph. And a lot of my most iconic conceptual photos were a result of a short story that I wrote. And I'm not like, no one's going to read these. They're not even worth, what I mean?
Yeah,
but
I know what you mean. Yeah.
But it's
you're fleshing out this image, and I suppose with some of your work that is so detailed in terms of the elements of the background, like there has to be that sort of rich story there to begin with, and that does make a lot of sense. Can you give us an example of one of your images that was a story? I've got a pretty good idea. I know of a couple. Like, what about the water coming down the stairs? I felt like that was quite.
Yeah, that was based on a story that was also based on, some emotions that I was going through as well. So, that was a kind of a personal outlet. But let me just scroll through and make sure that these images are on my personal website, which is aaronnace.com. Actually, here, right at the very top of my website, the top right, there's a woman who's half underground, half above ground. So it looks like she's kind of like buried in the ground, and her hair is roots. And she kind of looks
legs
like a
have got
flower.
the vines.
Funny story, by the way, that giant vine in that photograph, I had no idea, but that was a poison ivy vine.
Right.
Like,
I mean,
all of us on that photo shoot touched that thing and wrapped it around.
Really?
Jesus.
Yeah, and apparently the vines, like the roots, are way stronger than the plants.
Than the plant itself.
And we all got rashes, like crazy
really?
rashes. I felt so bad, but we got a great photo out of it, and everyone forgave.
Yeah, I
me,
mean,
so.
Yeah, the model's no longer with us anymore,
No, I mean,
but you got a great photo out of it.
the lawsuit's pending, but I mean, it should be fine.
Well, we all know as artists, sometimes you do that crazy stuff and it doesn't even work out, and the photo's
It's
not
true.
worth publishing, and still everyone gets poison ivy. So I'm glad it worked out, and I like the photo, and everyone else was happy with it too. But I wrote a little short story about an elderly woman who never had any children and wanted a child, and so she had a garden outside of her house. So she was crying in her garden that she wanted someone to keep company with, and basically a plant a child was birthed out of the soil in her garden that then became her daughter. And the one caveat was that every night, the woman, the daughter, had to go back into the ground where she came from. So during the day, she could like be a human and spend time with her mother, but every night she had to go back into the ground because she was like part plant and she had to be nourished by that. So that image is called Going Home, and this is like, you know, a sunset type of image, and the woman, you know, going back into the ground where she came from. So, you know.
It's pretty, yeah. That's some pretty out there stuff, thinking wise.
Yeah, you know.
Like your day job there at Flern is targeted. I would say it definitely as the sort of the higher end imagery, and you know, it's very clean and it's super polished and everything's looking commercial, ready to go. But we were speaking a couple of years ago. We were in Puerto Rico a couple of years ago, and we were talking about ideas and bits and pieces. And you said to me back then that, you know, one of your favorite shoots that you ever did was just to get a group of friends together in a car, drive out to the desert at night with some smoke bombs, and you just had a lot of fun with it. Like that is like that sort of free way of making images. Is that what gets you like really excited in your personal time? Is that what you love to do the most? Just go out there almost without a plan and just sort of get a feel for it?
Yeah, you know, I definitely, I mean, photography, again, it's like, I want to have a good time with whatever I'm doing. So that shoot was a blast because basically I just got to hang out with my friends for a weekend and you know, like, light off fireworks and try to create really fun images with it. And doing that sort of thing was just a big departure from these conceptual photographs that I do, where, you know, I spend weeks and weeks developing the concepts and, you know, finding locations and, you know, scouting people and getting hairstylists and wardrobe. And, you know, that, although I love it and it is like, you know, a fantastic outlet for creativity, that takes a lot of effort, you know, and to be able to, you know, for me, photography was that for a long period of time, where it was like, if I'm going to take a photograph, I'm going to spend weeks and weeks and weeks to produce this like high-end thing.
But you have a very specific goal right from the start. Even before you've picked up the camera, you have a very clear idea in your head of exactly what that's going to go. Yeah. Which is very, very different to what we spoke about a minute ago about you just driving out into the desert with a camera. Like, let's just go with it and let's just see what we get and being driven by that, which is, to me, like, both projects are creative, don't get me wrong, but I do think that the other one where you are just given a little bit more room to sort of go with the flow a little bit more can be just a huge boon.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, I think just opening up, for me personally, the idea that photography can really be anything. Like we were discussing earlier, on my Instagram recently, I've been posting a lot of food photography. So I'm really into food. I'm like an amateur chef. I try to cook pretty much everything that I eat, I try to make. And so I'm just, you know, like, I've been doing that for a while, and then I was like, dude, why don't I just take pictures of my food? So I, you know, like, duh, like, I'm into food, I'm into photography. So if you check out my personal Instagram, N as in Nancy, ACER, you'll see that I started photographing.
Your last picture is actually a dish of. Is that something you've cooked? Your last photo?
Yeah, that was my lunch yesterday.
Nice,
was
acorn squash. Okay.
Yeah, grilled acorn squash with hummus and you know, like red onions and thyme and pepper, whatever. Multi-talented
Jake. Not just talented, but multi-talented.
I know, he's one of those guys.
He's one of those guys.
So I just, you know, it's one of those things, and the whole concept of, like, for me, when I broke out of the idea of, like, I am a conceptual photographer, right? Because, like, on one side, that was really defining and I really love creating that work. But on the other side, it was kind of limiting. It was like, oh, can I not take a picture of food and publish it now? Like, are people going to be like, oh, what
true?
You know,
not conceptual enough.
Yeah.
Right. That's not conceptual. That's a food that, you know, it's like, you're a conceptual photographer. And I think I did that. I mean, no one else cares, obviously. I think that I did that to myself, right? It was like, oh, I can't be a food photographer. I can't be a landscape photographer. I can't do this. I'm a conceptual photographer. I have to make only conceptual photos. And when I kind of broke out of that and was like, No, like I'm a artist. I'll photograph whatever I want.
you want.
You know what I mean? Like 100%. And that to me is just like way more freeing and makes me like it renews my passion in photography all new, you know, when it's like maybe I've been doing the conceptual stuff for years and years and I'm like a little bit burnt out on it. Then I'm like, I'll just photograph some food, or I'll go to a national park and photograph some mountains. And, you know, to be able to do that other stuff for me is incredibly freeing. And, you know, it's at the end of the day, personal work. Maybe you don't have to publish that on the same feed where you put all your conceptual work.
That's true.
Whatever.
Yeah, but then you've raised this point a couple of times, is that you have Flern and you have Aaron Nace. Like you've mentioned this couple. You got your own website, you got your own stuff on there, you got your own Instagram, you got your own stuff in there, and that's totally fine. You don't, you know, you can certainly separate yourself up. That's not a problem. I know lots of people do that. They shoot weddings, but they also shoot more boudoir stuff, and they want to keep them separate. You know, they do like the sexy lighting and that sort of stuff. They can totally keep themselves separate. You don't have to put everything all under one.
Not
roof.
need all your eggs in one basket, do you?
Yeah.
So with you shooting, your love for shooting your food, which you love creating at the moment, you say you're into food. Are we going to see this as a combined direction now, where you're going to be literally with your conceptual photography into your food photographically?
Yeah, I was talking with a friend last night about it, and he's like, "Why don't you do conceptual photography with food?" And I was like,
There you go.
Don't tempt me.
I see a little story coming, Jake. It's going to be a story. It's going to turn it into Aaron Nace in his food.
Speaking of food photographers, I was speaking to Rob Grimm from Pro EDU last night.
Yeah.
Aaron, and he told me to send you deep, wet kisses, whatever that means.
Oh, well, I'll just take those kisses and put them in a special place.
Whatever happens in Chicago stays in Chicago. All right. I was like, I don't want to know what that's about, Rob, but I will pass it on for you.
I love Rob. I really do. It's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. And you know, it's one of those funny things where like, because the passion, okay, now I want to photograph food. And like you said, I have a history of conceptual photography. So like, what does it look like when you smash those together? Like Jake, with your love for anime and your love for photography, you put those things together and you get something new. And I think that, you know, if anyone is feeling like they're in a little bit of a creative rut, that's a good time to start exploring something new. And then you can come back to photography or come back to your other creative passion with a new kind of like sense of it. Like, you know, take this other new passion you're interested in and smash those things together. And you might find that, oh my God, all of a sudden I'm creating new work that's inspired that I've never made before. And, you know, my style is developing, and it's because you're taking multiple different passions and putting them together. So for me, it's always been a journey of like taking things that I'm interested in and shoving them together and taking pictures along the way.
So you're almost saying then that, you know, sort of a bit of a direction for people is to don't always necessarily lock your mind into one thing, but just let it go and open up and let it be a little bit free, so you can get to your end result of your creative image, rather than, you know, a lot of people today go, oh, you got to get it right in camera. Well, not every image dictates that solution, does it?
Oh, no, I
should get it right in camera.
Well, you know, and something, I mean, I'm like, as a Photoshop person and as a photographer, I got to say the photography is extremely important. And just about every one of my images that I consider strong is photography first, Photoshop
always.
Second.
Yeah.
You know, like if you want to like start with a strong core image, like photography is the way to go. But sometimes if you're looking to do something that you simply cannot do in a single frame, that's when Photoshop can come into the picture and help you out there. Yeah. So, you know, like concepts that I have, for instance, on my website, I'm looking at an image here. It's a woman floating above a sea of hands. This is a image that I shot of what I thought the underworld looked like. And, you know, this image took me months to make, and there's like hundreds of thousands of people forming the ground. Their hands are looking up. I don't know if you guys have a chance or a computer in front of you, but it's about halfway down on my website. And this image, you know, I had in my head is something I wanted to make, but not something I could do in a single frame. What I wound up doing is like building this rig and like covering people in sand and getting all this building wardrobe out of like burlap sacks and things like that. And then I hired like 20 to 30 models, just like regular people off Craigslist, to just like hold their hands up in different positions. And then I imitated like sunset lighting in my studio, and I photographed them, hundreds of different times. I cut them out of their backgrounds and then duplicated them to create the entire landscape. So this original image is like 100 megapixel, just crazy.
So
but
how in that shot, because I've got it on the screen in front of me now, how many shots make up that image, just to give people an idea of actually how much work you put into one of your visions, one of your conceptual shots?
Let's put it this way. I literally had to buy a new computer to be able to make that image for real. Like my computer could not handle the amount of information and the amount of layers. There's over like 500 layers.
I'm looking at it now. That's crazy.
In this photo. Yeah, it was really quite the effort. But, at the end of the day, because of, sketched it first, and then, from there went into the photographic process and then moved into Photoshop. So before anything was done, before I hired the models, before the actual production happened, I had a very clear idea of what the final product was going to look like, and that made it just so much easier to make that thing happen.
Wow.
So, anyone who's looking to do conceptual work, I would say, start with a two-dimensional sketch. You can learn a heck of a lot from a two-dimensional sketch. Even things like focal length and aperture, like you can learn that from a two-dimensional sketch, which is like kind of like a crazy idea, but like, if you want to, like, you're sketching something out, like if you need to capture a lot, like, yep, you're going to need a wide angle to do that. Or if it's like a little bit more graphic and two-dimensional, like, maybe a, 100 to 200 millimeter focal length would be your best bet.
It's
so
kind of giving you the guide for the tools you need to use to create the shot, isn't it? Really, in the idea. Or nowadays, obviously with the technology of smartphones, we just go to a music festival, shoot the crowd, put some skin smoothing on it, a couple of color filters, and jobs are good. And Instagram, here we come.
Think of that. That would have actually totally worked. Why didn't I think of that?
No, let's
bring it up to date then, and where you are now with Flern and the success that you've seen with that. I know, Wayne, you've got some stats there, haven't you?
Yeah, I have, because let's like Jay said, let's dive into Flern a little bit, because it's an educational platform now. On Flern.com, you've got Photoshop tutorials, Lightroom tutorials, photography tutorials, compositing tutorials, free tutorials, and even a bloody Flern magazine as well, haven't you?
Oh yeah.
I've got to ask, do you just have like too much time on your hands or something, Aaron? You too bored? Or, that's a lot of content, man.
No. I'm not bored at all. I am a very busy. My schedule is booked. I'm an extremely. I have a Lupe who you spoke with earlier. I mean, a good portion of her time is spent managing my day, and we have So it's just important to create a lot of content to me, because first of all, I really believe in giving back. So our free content has just been a core part of our business and a core part of who I am as a person, because obviously there are some of us who can afford the nice cameras and higher price education, but there are a lot of folks out there who can't afford that stuff, and they deserve to have the same opportunities as the people who can't afford that stuff. So from the beginning, free education has always been super important to me.
That's nice, man.
Yeah, it's like I was just by luck born into like a super fortunate situation with like my family and my upbringing. So I want to spread that joy to everyone. Spread
the love. Well, I've got a little statistic here, just from your YouTube alone, if I can throw that to the audience. Sure. Now, YouTube, man, we're talking about smashing numbers. 1.77 million subscribers. That's absolutely huge. And you're giving on YouTube 639 videos.
God, is that what it's at now?
And your audience has consumed over 500 plus million minutes of video. I'm just going to drop the mic and walk out now, I think. You know? 500 million minutes of video. I mean, those stats just for YouTube alone are just absolutely incredible, you know, with your, obviously, Flern.com jumping over to YouTube as well and giving away free tutorials and free videos. I mean, that's just absolutely tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. Did you ever relax or take vacations or anything, Aaron?
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I mean, I was in Alaska last week, man. I was,
2011 is brilliant. Yeah. Oh, wait,
2011
nice.
when Flern started.
Yeah. No, yes, definitely. I mean, in the beginning, this was kind of like an all hands on deck, right? Like, I did not take a break for years, and it started to wear on me. So these days, I have a pretty good work-life balance. Like, I work really hard when I'm here. I get a lot done, and, everything is very well scheduled, very well organized. So, like, our entire team knows exactly what's happening every single day, and we plan ahead as much as possible. Plus, I've got a fantastic team here who can take a lot off my plate, and that really, really helps. So, transitioning from, working every day, thinking only about work to where I am now, which is what I would consider a pretty healthy work-life balance, was just the decision to say, you know what, like, I need to take some time for me. I need my personal life to exist outside of my work, because honestly, I was just kind of getting burned out, you know? I was like, I felt like there was nothing of me left. I felt like I was just like this work robot, like almost like a servant to my business. And when that started happening, the creativity went away, my personal like fulfillment in life started going away.
I remember watching you when you were doing your videos in your front room there or something, like, you were doing them in your front room, and then you went to this just huge, just open plan studio and the major videos and that sort of stuff. And now it seems like, in your more recent videos, it's, I don't know whether this is, because it looks like that's the set behind you. I assumed that you'd sort of scaled things down a little bit and was trying to be a bit more homely.
It's just a set.
Because, you got Mama Flern in there and stuff.
Mama Nace.
Helping him out and stuff. Yeah, she's coming in and helping.
Yeah.
So I mean, is that a conscious thing to just try and bring it to try and be feel a bit more like homely and
Yeah. Flern for me, always from the beginning, like I wanted it to feel like you're kind of like learning and hanging out with a friend. Like, and your friend just happens to really love Photoshop, and is going to show you some stuff,
Come and be a friend, Aaron. Come and be a friend.
Come on, be a friend with us. And I did go through, these phases where I was like, oh, I'm going to get a big studio and show everyone my cool studio, And then at the end of the day, I was like, I really want our videos to have that, like, you're at home with me feel. So, So the room that I'm recorded in currently, and the room that you guys see me in, this is just a dedicated recording studio, but it's built out exactly like how I would love my living room at my house. I mean, we have like a record player in the back with like real antique speakers and a beautiful credenza and nice prints on the wall. And when we film in here, we fill this room with plants and make it like really, really homey. I'm really into plants as well.
I was going to say, you're into your plants, aren't you? You're a bit of a botanist down there, and into your crystals as well, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, man, I'm into it all. It's funny. My dad is a botanist,
right?
Horticulturist. He's been building botanical gardens his entire life.
Oh, wow.
And my brother is a PhD geologist.
Wow.
So yeah. So I've kind of got a passion for all of it. And growing up in Hawaii, constantly around nature, I was just very, very into everything tropical, and very strong connection with just nature in general. So
and how many plants do you have? How many plants do you have in the studio, Aaron?
I would say anywhere from 100 to 200.
Wow.
Mine and Jake's faces now are sort of jaws have just hit the floor. People can't see that.
That's incredible. Well, I would say it's definitely mission accomplished, Aaron, because I like, from me watching your recent videos, it definitely got that vibe of going back to your sort of roots of doing that sort of videos at home in your front room, back to where it was, and just being more sort of, insular and that sort of, personal. So, I would definitely get that
outside of that personal space, I mean, I know nobody can see it on the camera, but you still got an absolutely chuffing great studio, haven't you?
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, it's fantastic. We're super lucky here. Yeah. We're in one of the original buildings in Chicago that did not burn down during the Great Chicago Fire.
Wow.
So it's a timber loft. So we've got beautiful 12-inch by 12-inch timber supporting the entire structure of the building. Gorgeous. Which after the Chicago Fire, they made it illegal to make the structural elements of your building with wood, because the majority of the city burned down. So we're in a very, very cool building where everywhere you look is just this like 150-year-old like incredible beams of oak and it's like hardwoods at a thickness that you just like do not see anymore. We've got we're on the very top floor with a beautiful view of downtown Chicago. We've got 16 foot ceilings here and a bank of windows that's a couple 100 feet long that support a ton of plant life. So we've got a full kitchen built out in here and like a living room, dining room area. We've got a bedroom here as well. It's just a fantastic. I couldn't ask for anything more. We're so lucky to have this space.
Beautiful. Man.
Oh yeah, we're just so lucky. It really is. It's a pleasure to spend time here every day. And these like the food photos that I been posting. Like I cook those here. Wow. This is like I cook and eat most of my meals here at the studio.
Lunch round at yours then, Aaron, is it? Next week?
Come on over.
Looking at those food photos online, I think me and Jake will be in for a treat.
Please do. Well, yeah, this morning I got chicken, like 2 chicken breasts and chicken thighs, and I'm going to be making pan-seared skin-on chicken with thyme and cayenne and salt and pepper, and I'm going to put it in a cast iron and finish it in the oven. And
nice.
I'm going to serve that with a beet onion and garlic like soup puree with roasted carrots.
Making my mouth water. And
wow, it's like
one of my favorite meals as well.
That's like would have it.
So
right, let's start digging into the Photoshop a bit now and that sort of thing. You must have seen it all over the years. What is and obviously with education, you see a lot of people starting out with photography. Maybe they come across Flern as one of the first places that they come to start learning and that sort of thing. What are some of the, like, if you could name a couple or three, of the sort of the biggest, not mistakes is a bit strong, but things that you see people doing that you're like, oh, that's a classic Photoshop no that you'll regret in years to come. Like over whitening the eyes, for example. That one, like the vivid,
diamond white teeth.
Yeah, there's a nova going on in somebody's eye, that sort of thing. Like, what are some of the things that you see people doing early on that you think to avoid?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing, just a general piece of advice is, start off with the strongest photograph you possibly can, and then do your best to make it a bit stronger in Photoshop. But if you're starting off with a photograph that is just not strong to begin with, there's only so far that you can take that. I mean, Photoshop can be a fantastic tool to fix, things like, if your colors were just way off, putting that image in black and white is a really legitimate, good option.
Busted.
I
love it.
And I've been through that too. I've taken images where it's just like someone was standing in front of like a green neon sign and they got a crazy color cast on their face. And, it's really difficult to correct that sort of thing. So like black and white to the rescue, and don't feel bad about it because black and white photos are beautiful.
They kind of say that, don't they? If color doesn't add or boost anything in your image, then why not black and white if the image itself is strong in terms of its content?
Well, obviously, Jake, you're
Jake would be lost in black and white.
No. Well, you're very intentional with your color. I'm speaking of like a snapshot of like your cousin on the street with like this weird color cast on them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
that's fair.
Yeah. Like if you know what you're doing and you're bringing
Wayne.
color. What's that?
Wayne.
I just so happen to love black and white. You know what I mean? I love contrast.
Conveniently.
Have you ever seen a black and white shot of mine you don't like?
So what? We're recording, Wayne. We're recording. So are there any things that people do early on? Come on, Aaron. There must be some things that you see people doing early on that you're like, come on, you're trying to put that.
Yeah, I would just say like over processing in general. And I think that is also, like going back to the like, this photo, I don't know what to do with this photo. So they just like crank all their sliders, and I was guilty of that when I first started. I was like, look how cool I made this photo. Oh, that looks nothing like reality. And, looking at it years later, I'm attracted to the images that do look more real. So with my conceptual work, for instance, I'm not trying to create something that looks like it was done in Photoshop. I'm trying to make something that looks real. And having that as an end goal, I feel like helps me be a little bit more grounded in my editing. So I would say, if you apply effect that you're crazy about, maybe just tone it down a little bit, because I know that I personally have a tendency to overdo things. So whether I'm sharpening the skin, doing just like a massive retouch on a portrait, doing an HDR type of effect, after years of experience, my suggestion is to turn that effect down a little bit. Like I'll complete a full retouch on a person, frequency separation, like the full gamut. I'll group everything that I did in my retouch and then lower the opacity of that group to like 80, 90%. So some of that original photograph comes through because, people, they're not, like, they don't have perfect skin. Like, they don't have, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes, like, it's kind of easy to create a result where people don't look real anymore. Like, the character of an individual has been pulled out of the photograph, in support of, like, retouching every single pore and wrinkle and spot away. But when you do that, you lose the humanity of that individual as well. So I would say, if you are into retouching, like, yes, please, and it's super cool. And by the way, you can learn a lot of that on Flurn.com. But you can just tone it down a little bit. Is what I do these days.
I would echo that as well. I mean, I see it a lot with photographic techniques as well in camera, but I would echo that with photography as well. When you look at the image, do you want somebody to say, oh, that's really cool Photoshop, or do you want somebody to say, oh, that's a really cool photo?
Exactly.
So I think, if you can tone down the Photoshop a little bit afterwards, then you sort of get rid of that, like, oh, Photoshop, yeah. and like the image is left to sort of breathe. Yeah.
I completely agree. So, and there are times when, people will send me images that are, close to unsavable. And you'll say, like, what should we do here in Photoshop? And I've taken these images myself.
We all have. Yeah, no,
I still do. You know what I mean? I'm not like, I will never be above that. But my suggestion a lot of the time is, like, if possible, try to reshoot it. If it was a once in a time, like a wedding, yeah, you're not going to ask the bride and groom can you redo the wedding for me? I missed that one shot, right? But if
Aaron says turn it black and white.
Yeah. And it depends if you're the wedding photographer and you've actually missed all the shots. You might want to ask them to come back.
Right, yeah, exactly. I mean, there are some times when asking, or trying to recreate something is just like, if you photograph the solar eclipse that happens once every 10 years or whatever, like, good luck, right? But sometimes, especially if it's it's a concept or it's a client work, like, sometimes doing a reshoot is a really good idea. I'll do stuff, like, not often, thankfully, but when I work with clients, like, I've definitely done in the past where, like, something just didn't turn out the way that I thought it should, and I'll just do an extra day on the shoot and not charge the client. Be like, you know what, we can do better than this. Let's just go back. Let's redo this. I'll cover all the expenses. I can deliver you a better product. You damn well learn that lesson too of, like, try to get it right the first time, and make sure you're planned. So, for me as an artist, especially anytime I'm being paid for anything, I put a lot of energy into planning. It's not the fun part of the creative process, and it's a thing that I've had to like kind of learn to appreciate. But
necessary evil.
It's so necessary.
Yeah.
The more planned I am, honestly, just during the photo shoot, I feel way more like calm as well.
Yeah.
When it's like, I know exactly what's going on. This is not a frantic like I gotta create.
Because
Like,
you've done all your homework, haven't you? That's the point. And you've already got the plan and schedule in your head of what you need to do to achieve this or to achieve that, and the process you need to get to the end of it. And if you don't do that,
100%.
then you are one of those madmen on set that are going, I've got to get pictures.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's, the same thing like being in school. If you've studied your lessons and you understand the concepts behind what's going to be asked on the test, you can walk into class on test day and be really confident and say, you know what, like I really understand this. I'm going to do well on this test, and you're not going to be stressed out. But if you haven't studied and you haven't spent the time to really understand your source material, the day of the test comes and, you're going to be freaking
You'll be in
out.
trouble.
So definitely. And, same thing with our photography. And this is our career, so like this is not something where, in your personal work, if something doesn't turn out, like no big deal, right? You can just go do it again. If it's, if someone's paying for you, like
You got to deliver the goods, haven't you?
I mean,
Yeah.
if you want to be hired again,
Yeah.
I mean,
So
definitely.
jumping over to your tutorials, I mean, what's the most difficult tutorial you've had to produce in your eyes? Is there one where you thought, oh man, why did I start this one?
Some of the conceptual images that I've done where there's a lot of heavy Photoshop, and thankfully, we edit all of our videos. So it's, for anyone who's seen free tutorials on YouTube, you see my face through the entire tutorial. We have intros and outros and all of the mistakes and all of the dead space. That's all cut out. So what you experience is a highly polished finished product. And that really helps out with our more advanced content as well, because we break everything down into chapters and sections. So what the final product might be an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. We have some tutorials that are 10 hours plus, but what's being recorded is like 30-minute segments. So there have been many times, especially with conceptual images, because this sort of stuff is hard. Like it's still hard for me. You know what I mean? Like to pull off like a composite where you take a person from one environment and put them into another environment. Like it's difficult to do that well. It just is. And I've been doing it for 10 plus years, and that is my, what I would call my specialty. And it's still difficult for me. So there are times when I'm making tutorials when I just like don't do it, when I'm just like, that didn't work like at all. This looks horrible. And I'm like, I don't even know why. I just don't, the color's off. Something's wrong with this. I just know something's wrong with it, but I don't even know what, So in those cases, I take a break. I go back and re-record it and try it again and try it again and try it again until I get it. And then I'll say that, in the video too, be like, hey, by the way, this is my 5th time trying this because this is really hard, but we're going to nail it this time. So
6th time lucky.
Exactly. But, thankfully that doesn't happen too often. But by recording the content in smaller segments, we're able to nail every single segment. And
I get you.
I'm not on, it's not one video that's 4 hours long where I have to do everything perfectly. It's recorded over usually multiple days as well. So, for instance, this week, starting today, I'm recording a pro tutorial for Flurn.com, soft portrait lighting and retouching. I photographed a friend of mine who was, 2.5 weeks before having a baby. So she was very, very pregnant. We did like beautiful pregnancy photographs in the studio, and we're going to be editing them in like a beautiful, just like soft lighting, like, kind of like a beauty, like low contrast, almost like Andy Leibovitz type style.
Nice.
And I'm recording that over today, tomorrow, and Friday. So today I'll do, about 2.5 hours of recording.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I'll do about 3 hours of recording, and then Friday about 3 hours of recording as well, broken up.
Nice. So almost quite painterly then in terms of the lighting and the dynamic range.
Exactly,
nice.
exactly. So that's the goal for that. And, it's fun to be able to teach this stuff too, because this was my first time photographing a pregnant person. So, getting to do that is like, oh, cool. Like it was a really good learning experience for me, a way to, test out new types of lighting and, work with new types of subject material and, then do my best to make those images look beautiful and have their own unique style in post-processing, and then share that knowledge with everyone else. So if anyone's interested in learning that type of technique, perfect. We've got that video for you.
It's just amazing, isn't it? Because you just said it's the first time for you photographing a pregnant person. So it just goes to show, no matter how many years you've been doing it, there's always new subject matter which requires a slightly different approach mentally and physically in terms to get the shot that you want as well. We're always being tested.
100%. 100%. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that I haven't photographed that, I just, gaining a connection with your subject. And here's just another thing that I've learned over the years is that, I've spent many years kind of focusing on the technology and focusing on the camera and focusing on the lighting and, kind of focusing on the technical side of things. But what I've learned is that when I focus on what's in front of the camera, my images always turn out better. So, this goes back to the early days with my travel photography when I first got my start with a point and shoot. I was just in these incredible places and I snapped a picture with my point and shoot camera and got incredible photos because it was the right time of day and I was in this beautiful place. And I think so many times as photographers, we do focus on the gear, but if you put something in front of you that looks amazing, and you have a camera with you, there's a good chance you can get an amazing picture.
Yeah.
So, I try to focus my energy on whatever's in front of my camera, making sure that, if that's a person, making sure that person is comfortable, having a really good time, and we've got a good relationship going on. If that's, a still life, I'm focusing all of my energy on building the still life, and then taking the picture is just the press of the button.
It's just a digital box, isn't it, that records what you create at the end of the day,
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
But in recent years, we've seen retouchers become like this. It's a skill in its own right. It's an art in its own right, no question. Mm-hmm. And I would say that you could easily argue that there's as much skill in the actual retouching, from a professional retoucher's point of view, as there is in the person taking the picture. My concern that I see at the moment in the industry is that perhaps retouchers don't get the credit that they deserve on certain projects. For example, there is no law or anything like that that stipulates that the retoucher needs to be credited. I know there's many professional photographers use incredible retouchers, and retouchers do, some could say, the majority of making that image look good, but they are not credited in those images. Would you like to see that change in coming years? Like, would you like to see more credit for the retoucher, at least equal credit, at least credited alongside because even big editorials are still not crediting the retouchers.
Yeah, I would definitely like to see that. And I don't want that to stop with the retoucher. Like the hairstylist, the makeup artist, whoever's doing
But that's it, but they are credited.
Scouting.
That's what I mean. Like a lot of the times that the makeup artist and the stylist are credited, and you have the photographer, but the retoucher is not credited. I think sometimes that like photographers are still hiding behind that retoucher doing some of the work, and it's just I took the picture, legally it's mine. And I would definitely want to see, I want to see more transparency when it comes to those images personally. Yeah, so definitely I would like to see more retouchers being credited in big
like
name editorials. Yeah.
I mean, in all fairness, one of my last campaigns, I wasn't even credited. I was the photographer.
Well, you did just press the button, mate. I didn't want to bring it up, but
and it was black and white, to be fair.
Oh well, yeah. It's But do you think it's valuable for all photographers to know how to retouch? Because now I think we are getting younger people coming out of university, and I don't think that I know some people who don't retouch, and they just ship all their images off immediately straight to a retoucher, and it's not that expensive. You can get incredible retouchers in somewhere in Europe, like Greece or something like that, very low cost to get phenomenal results. Like, do you think it's valuable for photographers to learn retouching themselves, or should you just go to the best people? That's their job. They're the best people at what they do. You're never going to be as good as them. Should you bother to learn it?
I think it's valuable to learn retouching, as it's valuable to learn any type of art, or just learn anything in your life. Do I think it's necessary as a professional photographer? I don't. And I think for people like, let's say, Annie Leibovitz, because everyone knows her name, right? Like, I don't think it makes sense for her to retouch all of her own images. Because she shoots a lot, and these are high-end campaigns, and the volume that she creates, I don't think that she necessarily has the time to retouch all of her own images.
For sure.
And at a certain point, you're running a business, and a photographer, taking that photo is one part of that business, getting a retouch is another part of that business. And, for certain high-end photographers, people who are being paid a lot of money and shooting a lot, and I'm talking about people who are, traveling constantly and shooting, 4 or 5 days a week, whatever it is. For those people, I think it definitely makes sense to have someone help out with the retouching, like it makes sense to have someone help out with the style and wardrobe. Yeah. For someone who's getting started and doesn't have a huge budget and wants to do the creative things themselves, I think retouching is a fantastic way to have your work stand apart from other people. I think
that's true, because just to echo that, Aaron, I think you can develop a personal style and look through the retouching like hugely as well. It's not just the image making. I think you can certainly develop a look through your post pro. Yeah, definitely.
And I agree, because commercially, I probably outsource to my retouchers 70 to 80% of my work. I don't hide behind that. My commercial work, I have my bank of retouchers I work with very closely.
But you know how to retouch, though. Like, you do have a background in it. Yeah.
And here's another thing. There's the process. I'm one of these people that dislikes sitting in front of the computer hours after I've shot my images, because the type of work that I shoot is not very conceptual, and it is very fashion, beauty orientated. Then I take a lot of pride and time in my lighting to get my image right in camera. The only work that really goes into my work in Photoshop would be skin retouching and a bit of reshaping here, there, and a color grading palette. Really, I don't really change backgrounds or conceptuals or sceneries or anything like that. So my commercial work is of a sort of a generic sort of platform, really.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with the type of retouching. Like, if you're just sitting down and doing skin retouching 5 hours a day, day in and day out, like, that can get pretty taxing after a while. And hiring someone out to do that is, could be a really good option. If your retouching is a part of your style, or if you're creating conceptual photographs where, you're pulling multiple different elements together and you want to create a certain look, then I think it most definitely makes sense to do your own retouching. And, speaking from personal experience, I retouch all of my own photos, because I really enjoy retouching and working on my images. And I enjoy being a part of the process from the beginning all the way to the end. But I sympathize with you. Sometimes I don't want to sit in front of a computer for hours. Yeah. So but it really depends on what I was photographing. If I wasn't doing conceptual work at all, if I was, doing, straight portraits in a studio, I don't think I would feel the same pull to do my own retouching. I think that I'd, be totally happy with outsourcing that, provided I found a talented retoucher that I could work with.
Yeah, and I work with more.
And that's
than
a good point. Yeah, is finding a good retoucher that fits with your style is hugely important. Not all photographers are the same. Not all retouchers are the same. You've got to find a retoucher that suits your work. Yeah.
And they understand you as well. Once you work with them after a little while, they understand you and your wants and your needs and your style, and obviously the look, especially if you give them any color reference chart for color grading afterwards. They understand your workflow, and then when you build that rapport, I mean, they're retouching your work pretty much as you would anyway. I think that's the biggest thing to take here, is building that relationship, which takes time.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And, that goes hand in hand with just building a strong team of people that you can work with day in and day out. And I can't say enough for the team of people that I personally work with, because, I would not be able to do what I do today without the team. I was able, like last week, for instance, I was in Alaska, and we published a ton of content, and I was 100% hands off with it, because I've got a fantastic team. We've worked together for years and years, and they know every step of the part of the process just like I do. So, I can give them, like full leave to do everything and come back and know that they've done a great job. So I would say building those relationships with your team, finding people who you know and trust and can work with for long periods of time. Super, super helpful.
How big is Team Learn, Aaron?
We're about a half a dozen in our Chicago studio. We're about half a dozen like worldwide. We work with a lot of people like over Skype and things like that. And then we've got just a ton of contractors. You guys know, with photo shoots, like hiring hairstylists, makeup artists, this
external
sort of thing.
Teams.
So, exactly. Yeah. We've got a bunch of external teams, and then a bunch of agencies we work with, like our web development agency and things like that. But so it's kind of a distributed type of deal.
Type of network, that's awesome. But it just goes to show, doesn't it? When you providing as much content as you are to fulfill the requirements on the learning platform of learn.com and YouTube and all those other things, you need a team to give people the quality and the amount of content that you're dishing out. That is not a one-man solo fly sort of job, is it?
Oh, yeah. For sure. Especially, that level of content. Yeah,
that level, that's absolutely huge. Yeah,
I would just be absolute wreck.
Which is why you need these holidays, because without you being you and getting yourself back to who you are, then you don't have that in your work, do you? You lose yourself.
100%. And I'm kind of like really lucky that my profession involves me being on camera and also teaching, because when I teach something, it forces me to have a really good understanding. If I'm going to explain something to someone else, have it actually make sense, I have to understand that source material incredibly well. Like, you can tell when someone's trying to explain something to you and like they don't fully understand it themselves, because it's very hard for you to understand it. But if someone like really gets something and they explain it to you, it's pretty easy to understand that thing, provided it's explained in a good way. So being a teacher and an educator has forced me to get a much better understanding of my subject material. So I think I'm a better Photoshop user because I've had to turn around and teach these concepts to other people. Also, because I'm on camera a lot, it kind of forces me to like be in a good state of mind. Like that for me is kind of paramount. Like in my life in general, like my goal is just to like keep my state of mind as good as possible in general. Like I literally cannot afford to go into periods of time where I'm like not camera ready, for lack of a better word. Like I'm on camera a lot. And, it's like I got to be in a good mood for it too. You know what I mean? Like no one wants to learn like, hi, we're doing this. Screw it all.
I just want to skip the bikini wax for 1 week. Just want a week off.
Yeah, thankfully I'm just waist up.
Do you have one of those days where you come in, you go, man, I'm just not feeling the buzz for it today, and then we're rolling, and hi, welcome to
100%,
camera face,
100%. And it's. It comes in a lot of different ways. Sometimes I'm like actually sick, like I'm a human being, right? And sometimes I have to record when I'm sick. And sometimes I just like didn't get enough sleep the night before, or I, stressed out because of, running a business and all the, things that come along with that.
Yeah.
But these days, like when I'm not in my office, I am spending all of my energy just to make sure that like I'm functioning as a peak as possible. So like exercise, super important. Eating like top notch, super important. Like yoga and meditation in the mornings, super important. Like taking care of, my physical, mental, and spiritual well-being allows me to show up and be on camera day in and day out, and you'd be able to accomplish my job, without things kind of like pulling me back. So I don't think I would have.
Have you always been like that, Aaron, or is it something that you've put into place in recent years?
No.
I don't want to give a leading question or anything.
Dude, no. And I think that I say that I'm lucky because I'm on camera so much. It's kind of like forced me to have this routine in my life, and it's forced me to appreciate how important this is. Because, you know, if I wasn't on camera, like, you have up days, you have down days, like, no big deal in general in life. But when you're on camera, like, you have to kind of, like, you have to be present. You have to be there, and you explaining things on camera, like, it takes a lot of, like, mental and physical energy as well. You know, anyone who's ever, like, given a speech in front of a, you know, public audience, like, you'll know by the end of it, you're, like, exhausted.
Oh yeah, we know that.
Definitely. So no, I have not always been like this. I mean, I have gone through huge bouts of depression and, you know, periods of time when I wanted to quit my, you know, like, completely shut down Flern, pack up the doors, and, you know, move somewhere else. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, there have been, you know, it's been 10 years, right? So yeah, there's been so many things that have happened over that time. And, you know, I've really just come to appreciate that, like, when I'm just taking care of, like, my physical, mental, and spiritual health, that, like, pretty much everything in my life just gets way easier. So yes, 100%. There are many times when I'm just, like, shoving donuts down my face and don't want to get up in the morning, and I'm like, why do I hate my life? You know, it's like, oh, well, I'm literally making no healthy choices. Duh. You know, but when I'm in a state where I'm like, you know what, I'm going to take care of my body, I'm going to take care of, like, my mind, I'm going to just, like, take care of this stuff, then it's like, yeah, I'll show up for work. What do I got to do? This, no problem. Like, let's get it all done. So,
nice.
You know,
Okay. You are definitely not alone. I know that many creatives go through that same process, and it's and, you know, and I'm really pleased that you found something that, you know, that works for you. It's not to say it's going to work for everybody, but for sure, like, for you, you know, finding that way of, you know, relaxing, getting your head in a good space when you're not in the studio. No, I'm really pleased, man. I'm really pleased.
It's important. It's important. Wow.
And it's very easy to kind of, like, forget that sort of thing. Like, you know, I've gone years without exercising, for instance, and, you know, like,
that's how I got my physique.
It sounds so, like, straightforward. Like, everyone's like, yeah, exercise and eat, right? Yep, that's how you should do that. You know,
true.
But
it's easy
when you're actually, like, exercising frequently and eating right. Like, it's like, why do I feel so good? Like, why am I, like, good? And it's like, oh yeah, I'm just, like, I'm doing the things that literally everyone in the world knows is good for you, and that has results in your life. So, definitely, like, gone through many periods of my time. You know, my weight has fluctuated up and down. Everyone can watch the videos over the last 10 years and see that. It's very obvious. You know, they've seen me on camera when I wasn't doing my best. Like, it's very obvious.
Binge watch coming up.
Yeah, for real. You know, I can't.
Aaron. That's great. I
can't hide behind anything because, you know, I've got videos of me to prove it. But
true.
That's
you know,
awesome.
Thankfully, I've really come to an appreciation for just keeping this machine
running,
this body here running as good as possible. And man, it just puts me in a better mood. I'm more, like, excited about hanging out with my friends, meeting new people, and my work just doesn't seem to be stressful. It seems to be like, yeah, let's get this done. Let's do a great job.
And, you know, and who benefits from all of that? Well, it'll be all your subscribers and all those people that have that are on your educationalflern.com, of course. All the people at the receiving end.
Right. And everyone in my personal life,
yeah,
you know, like, I mean, family and friends, right?
Yeah.
You know, no one wants to deal with me when I'm, like, cracked out and grumpy as hell and blaming everyone else for my problems. Like, no, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I know you're so busy.
I think that's
really
a perfect time to close on that happy note and being in a happy place, both mind, body, and soul.
And speaking of Flern, I think you got some money off to give me, Wayne. Is that right?
Well, mate, yeah. I mean, first of all, we've got to ask Aaron. This is something we ask all our guests as well, Aaron, and this is where we ask you to personally recommend 2 artists, either from the photographic or video world, or even Photoshop world, that could come on to Podlamania as a guest and do another episode with us.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you don't have to commit to that right now live, but, you know, unless you've got somebody at the forefront of your brain, of course, you know.
Yeah, I'll message you. I mean, I do have one person, but I don't have 2. So let me just I'll message you and give you my recommendations of people who I personally would love to hear on this podcast.
Love it.
That sounds awesome.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I do have a little promotion, Jake. You're absolutely right, and I hope you've got a pen for this because you might be able to get 20% off now instead of paying full price, mate.
I'm definitely using it.
So, and for all our listeners, we'd like to just remind you that if you'd like to be part of the Flern learning community, that's at flern.com, and take advantage of all that creative, juicy stuff that Aaron's been preparing for you guys for over a decade now. Aaron has kindly given us a discount code, which is pens at the ready, everybody. It's Podlamania 20. Okay, and that will give you a whopping 20% off the subscription cost of Flern.com. And remember, that gets you instant access to absolutely everything. And one payment gives you all of Flern. So just head on over to Flern.com and whack in that 20% discode, 20% discount code.
That's super generous, Aaron.
To take advantage. Yeah, thank you, Aaron. Yeah,
very much. Thank
you
so
still
much.
have hundreds of free videos as well. If you just want to go over there and get a taste of what Flern's got for people, there's still hundreds of free videos there as well.
Yeah, and that's what I recommend people start out with. Get those free videos. If all you need is a simple technique and you can learn that from a free video, fantastic. Yeah. You'll get a good sense of what you're going to get with the pro content, and our pro tutorials, we're able to go more in depth and teach things that we just don't have the scope for in our free shorter tutorials. Not to mention you get raw images included, as well as actions, brushes, and presets that just make. Like, for instance, our frequency separation retouching tutorial, we have a frequency separation action that does a ton of the work for you. So you don't have to, struggle over, getting everything set up. So that's included in the tutorial, awesome. As well as, high-end raw images that you can practice on. So
and I can vouch for that as well. I'm a pro subscriber over there as well, and I know that you guys put out quality content. It's it's definitely video, like very very high production values, like big sets and stuff. Yeah, going through a lot of detail. Yeah, really good.
It's where Jake learns his retouching. So
that's it. So if you like my images, you can thank Aaron Nace. There you go.
And Aaron,
I do like your images.
And Aaron, before we go. Before we go, where can our audience find you on the social media? Where can they find you?
You can check out my personal social media is AKN as in Nancy ACER. So that's AK Nacer. Yep. It's Aaron Carey Nace with an R at the end. So AK Nacer. That's my personal Instagram. I post pretty often. Food, life. Yesterday, me and my beautiful wife, it was our 3-year wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And we're on, if you're looking to catch up with Flern, that's PHLEARN. Yep. You can catch us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We're on all of the different accounts. So AK Nacer for my personal work and life adventures, and Flern for everything
else. So that's on your web, YouTube, Facebook, and of course your Photoshop tutorials would be on flern.com/Photoshop-tutorials. Correct?
Yeah, or you can just go right to Flern, and then there's a catalog button at the top. It's a drop down to get to any of our content there.
And the Instagram has snippets of your YouTube videos now as well, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
Exactly. That's something we just started doing, and I'm really excited about it. We've got a 1-minute time limit, so there's obviously, we can't teach very complicated things in a minute, but we can most definitely get some great content across. If you're interested in my personal portfolio website, it's AaronNace.com. That's AARON. N as in Nancy, ACE.com.
And
I highly recommend people go check that out. There's some phenomenal work.
Yeah, phenomenal work. And the 365 stuff is just amazing down on there.
The Flern stuff is okay, but the Aaron Nace stuff, that's...
Well, that's amazing. And just to round off the show, just a little bit of a plug for us as well, Jake, I think, just for our listeners, because we've had somebody ask, believe it or not, if they can donate, and that would be donate cash. So we're going to give them the introduction of how they can do that. And we also have a support page over on Patreon, and that will be patreon.com/Podlamania. So if you'd like to help us to produce and record even more great interviews and great content with some of the world's greatest creative talents, then your support is very much appreciated. And thank you for the person that asked where they could donate. So we take that with pride.
They all just want to chip in to get you a new shirt, mate. That's all it is.
And a haircut for you, mate. But remember, folks, to stay up to date and be the first to know about new episodes on all creative things from the photography and video world, make sure you subscribe to the podcast at podlamania.podbean.com/subscribe. And if you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Podbean. And please give us a like, and don't forget to comment and share. Your likes and your comments, especially on Apple Podcasts, help promote our rankings. So if you can do that, that would be amazing. And lastly, thanks for joining us. It's been another great episode with a little insight into the big world of Aaron, Nace, and Flern. And
thank you so much, Aaron. Yeah, really appreciate it. Really good chat.
Happy
really
to come
chat.
on anytime.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
And we look forward to catching up with you all on the next episode. And Aaron, just like Jay said, thank you ever so much for your time. We know how busy you are, and it's been an absolute pleasure and a brilliant show. Thank you.
Thanks so much. It's been awesome.